please at this time take a moment to shut your cell phones off or put them on mute. And I have asked Rich to read the preamble.
Hi, my name is Richard, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Richard.
Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other, that they may solve their common problem and help others to.
And without further ado, we're going to start on chapter 11, A Vision from You. And Stephanie from No Frills is going to start.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steph. I'm an alcoholic. I'm going to share my experience, strength, and hope as they relate directly to this chapter. So why I can be here is the same reason all of you can be here when I pick up the first drink. I can't stop, and I don't know what's going to happen next. And rarely was there a night of 2 drinks. And almost never was there a night that wasn't immediately preceded by guilt, shame, remorse, anxiety, self-loathing, misery. I made all the decisions most of us make when we're drinking that only furthered those feelings. When I first came to AA 12 years ago, I got together 4 years, and they talk about dry drunks in this very chapter, and I was one of those. I came to meetings, but I didn't do any of the work, i.e. the steps or giving back what was so freely given to me. And so after 4 years, it was a really easy relapse, even though I had friends in the rooms. That wasn't enough. I needed to go through the steps and go through this book with a tougher sponsor who taught me how to be a tougher sponsor. And so I've done that this time, and I had together 4 years. I relapsed full on about almost 4 years, and now I'm back almost 6. And it's a totally different thing by putting myself all in, which is really what this chapter is about. So when I finally read the book, and I got to this chapter, and I'd been through Bill's story, I'd been through Bob's story. I knew the other chapters preceding this, and at first this seemed to me like, well, this is just a recap of everything. And in some ways it is. I think it's a chapter that summarizes what's come before it. But hopefully by this point, for the average reader of this, they've gone through the steps and some of the literature, some of the steps with their sponsor, and have a better understanding. So when you're reading this now, you're coming at it with a little time sober. You're coming at these things, hopefully, in my experience, with a little more clarity. And so things spoke to me in this chapter that hadn't spoken to me earlier in the book. And of course, there's the first thing I circled when I went through it for most normal folks. Immediately, I'm not one of most normal folks. So what was once a release from care, boredom, and worry for me, and certainly medicated my anxiety and helped me, has now become nothing more than terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair, right? The 4 horsemen, and I would add another 6 or 8 to those horsemen for the way I felt, right? It was many more than 4 horsemen. So what was once something that I did enjoy had become something that was making me miserable. And you see that right on the first page of this chapter. We go immediately from that right down into what it really meant to us, because we're not normal drinkers. And he says in the very first page, the whole point of AA, right? It works because we're telling each other, because I believe that you understand. So again, that's been reiterated and reiterated, but I started to be able to hear it when I read this chapter, because I was finally, the fog had lifted and the sponsor had helped me to see things. And then on page 152, they say, we have shown how we got out from under. You say, yes, I'm willing. I know I must get along with liquor, but how can I? And that, I think, is the biggest question for each of us when we come in here. How is this possible? I can't imagine a life without it. I will be, as they go on to say, boring and glum, and I'll lose my whole personality. And when I'd first read that earlier in the book, I certainly thought that for myself. By this point, as I'm finishing up, I realized that my personality was in no way wrapped up in alcohol, and in fact, it was diminishing it. In big part, because I'm fabulous, and it was hidden. Hidden way beneath the guilt, shame, and remorse that alcohol was causing. And then the paragraph right after that, yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Life will mean something at last. That's better than any of the promises earlier in the book, right? I mean, I love that things that won't baffle me anymore, so on and so forth. But that's just one segment. There are promises throughout the book. And this, to me, is the biggest one. I'll have a life. I'll have a life. Like, I say often when I tell my story, it annoys me when people say, I have a life beyond my wildest dreams. Because for this alcoholic, I didn't have any dreams. I didn't have a picture of a life. I never thought I'd get married, have kids. I didn't even think I'd live till the age of 30, right? So for me, the dream is a life, nothing more. It's very subjective. I don't have the things I thought I'd have, but I have things. I have things that if I look carefully are more meaningful to me than anything I ever thought I wanted. And I think that's what we have in that one little paragraph. That is the essence of AA, right there. That's your promise. You'll have a life. It then becomes what you make of it, right? So you've done the steps, you've done the work. Now you have the foundation and the opportunity to make a life. And on page 153, I love the paragraph that begins with, it may seem incredible that these men are to become happy, respected, and useful once more. Should you wish them above all else and be willing to make use of our experience, we are sure they will come. The age of miracles is still with us. Our own recovery proves that. I'm actually an atheist. I usually start out by saying that and then ask that you keep your minds open. So I'm not someone who uses the word miracles. I don't think it's a miracle. I think that the people who come here every day and read the books and sponsor people, if that to you is a miracle and something that a higher power has given them, I would never deny that. For me, it is just the action. It is that God is within all of us, and when we get sober, we tap into it and we can give it back. But that really is the whole message here, right? Giving back. That's it. Their vision for us, as I see it, is that we go through the steps. We do the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. That does not have to mean you believe in God, capital G. That is up to you to define your higher power. And that should always be made very clear, in my opinion. But that's it. Like, this is the crux of it. This is everything. And the vision isn't that we have stuff. The vision isn't that we have a life filled with all the things we prayed for that we want. A vision is that we have a life, that we've done the work and we've built a foundation so that we can build a life. And then, we go back into Bill's story, and I'm so sick of reading Bill's story. His ego is painful to me, really effing painful. And then we have a little bit about Dr. Bob, and Bill Dotson is the third man, and that's when you see the picture of the three guys, and that's Bill and Dr. Bob helping. So skip through that. We've heard it so many times. But again, I could identify differently by the time that came up. And then really we're stopping right where I think the chapter gets incredibly hopeful. And the message just continues to be, it's here. The answer is here. And they're clear that it isn't only here, that there are other places to get it, but that they hope that every alcoholic will have the chance to find this message. And that this will be his destination. And that when they were writing that, I mean, the very cool thing to me about this, and I'll close with that, when they were writing that, it was like, still 100 people. And now we're like 140,000 groups all over the world. So quite literally, this can be the destination of every alcoholic in almost every country or big city, if you're lucky enough to live in a big city, right? So their dreams in only 78 years, their hopes and dreams for this program have really already become a reality. And the key is that we keep showing up and giving back so that this can be not just a vision for ourselves, but for others. That's my take. Now I'd like to hear from you.
Show of hands.
Alcoholic.
Hey, Richard.
You did a great job, and unfortunately we had to stop there because we're listening to Bill, put that foundation down, that crescendo of what is a vision for you. I mean, he's building it up. The vision for you is not going to be, a brand new car or a beautiful house. It's going to be something else. And on that first page, the conviviality, that drinking, because by the time I've gotten to this chapter, I've done my steps, I've gone through the book, and it's an overview, but now I'm looking at it differently. Now I'm looking at it not as separate stories, but I'm looking at it as the synergy of what happens, that the four horsemen, yes, I felt that, and it's right up there with quicksand, that feeling that no one else has but an alcoholic in that moment of really the darkest of dark that people don't know about. So, now it's a synergistic movement rather than a story by story, and so he's building up with the progression of the disease, and then what happened to us, when he talks about at the Mayflower Hotel and making that phone call and getting to Henrietta Seiberling, that going for help and hooking up with Dr. Bob. And it's funny they mentioned Dr. Bob. I think going out and making amends to people because he had gotten drunk before. He didn't make it. And then when he went out and did that, like doing the steps, it worked for him. And, going to Bill Dodson, to giving that help to somebody else. The funny part about that story is that when Bill Dodson says, I was in a private room, it used to be at Akron General Hospital, when you ended up in a private room, that means you were about to die. So they took you out and he wakes up in the room and goes, whoa, no. And the other character in that is Ernie Galbraith, because he ends up in the same bed as Bill Dodson did. And Ernie Galbraith, matter of fact, married Dr. Bob's daughter. They eventually got divorced, but that's another story, because he was a real ladies' man. And the crescendo of a vision for you, again, is not material things, but a vision for you is that I've just laid out what happened, and a vision for you is that you have that happen with you, that you go talk to another alcoholic, that you experience the joy and view a miracle like he has, or they have, of what your life might be like if you get involved in this, boring and glum. I know a lot of people boring and glum before AA. They're still boring and glum, and but I felt the same way. I was like, how are you're gonna ruin a guy who shits in his pants and makes him into boring? And I thought I'd be playing bingo every night, but what I found is a life that is more exciting, more interesting, more in depth than ever I had when I thought I was drunk. So, again, I don't want to. The second part of this chapter is unbelievable, because it really does. He does lay out what that vision for you is, but just living that way is what will attain it. So, thank you.
So next week will be a great meeting. Be sure to be here. Sorry about this one.
Show of hands.
Okay. Barb, would you take us out?